The Department of Basic Education is considering allowing the return of all primary school learners full-time. Pupils in public schools have been on a rotational schedule since last year. The department says it will be considering a full-time return as learners are less likely to be hospitalized or to die from COVID-19 complications. For more on this, I'm joined on the line by Mr. Elijah Mhlanga, the Basic Education spokesperson. I'm also joined by Cynthia Barnes, the General Secretary for the National Teachers Union, and Dr. Anthea Ceresetto, the CEO of the Governing Body Foundation. A very good afternoon to all of you, and thank you so much for your time. Let's start with you, Mr. Mhlanga. You are saying that you want to open up primary schools for all of the students to start coming in because students are less likely to contract the virus or be complicated by it. But what about the teachers? Have they been considered in this equation?
Good afternoon, Tom. We don't want to, but we intend submitting a proposal to outline the learning losses already incurred because of the rotational approaches which different schools have been implementing as part of managing the impact of COVID-19 on schools. So the matter was discussed yesterday internally in the sector. There is no proposal as yet in writing that exists that we can take to any platform for consultation. Once the matter was discussed yesterday, the next step is to put together a proposal. From then we start to consult the teacher unions, we will then consult the SDB associations as well, but we are not there yet. All that we are doing now is to take forward what the DG of the Department of Basic Education mentioned at the portfolio committee a month ago or so when he appeared there together with the other members of the Department of Basic Education.
So this is, as you're saying, Elijah, still very much an issue under consideration. No concrete plans have been made. But let me ask you, Ms. Barnes, from the National Teachers Union, what would be your initial reaction to this consideration that is being tabled or that will be tabled?
Thank you very much. What I like the most is that Mr. Mhlanga has spelled it out to say this is a proposal. We are still going to invite the unions to sit down with the unions as well as the SGPs to see whether it is imperative for the schools to be open. In my opinion, I think they should really sit down. We should really sit down and think about it because we are the virus is already approaching us, which is called the third wave. So if we can open schools now for everybody, the department must do what they are supposed to do. For example, there are schools that are congested. If those learners had to go back in full force, then which means the teachers are not taken into consideration. They don't care whether the teachers they contract this virus or not. And what about the children's parents at home as well? So we also need to look into that and then come up with an amicable solution.
Dr. Ceresetto, in your view, what would need to be in place in order for this to be a viable option?
The matter that has been raised by the union is quite correct. We have to consider the safety of the learners, the safety of the teachers, and the families to which they return. So that would be foremost in the minds of people making the decision. We have been told that primary school children are least likely to suffer serious illness from this disease. But of course, there are risks as they travel to and from school, and there are risks when they take the virus home, possibly to their elder relatives. So that is a matter to be taken seriously. On the other hand, we also have to take note that schools are a safe place for children and a good place for children. So keeping them out of school unnecessarily must be the last resort. They cannot go back if it cannot be safe, and we have in schools protocols that have to be applied. That is the distance that children have to maintain between themselves and the teacher. So if those distances can be maintained, we should enable as many children to return as possible. The children need their education. They need the routine of schools. and they need stability in their lives. And often being at school is the place where they get stability. There are adults that they can trust, and that has been missing lately. So there's so much in a child's life that has been missing because they've been unable to attend school recently. So we have to weigh up the various risks, and that's why consultation is important, where we are given the health risks by the people who know those. We balance them with what we know in education to be good for children. And then we have to make a decision because life has to go on. We don't know the progression of this disease. We can't hold children's education forever. Children who are at home are not really learning anything. We believe the younger children, if they don't have really good adult supervision all the time, they're not really learning effectively. They need to learn in a social context with a teacher. That's the most suitable for them. So
I think you have, Dr. Sarah Schoeman, really highlighted a lot of the challenges that are being faced by students who are studying remotely or on this rotational calendar. But before we go into the issue of the actual curriculum and the impact that the rotational scheduling has had on the academic part, Mr. Mhlanga, let me ask you, as far as the vaccination program for teachers is concerned, are there discussions perhaps around introducing the vaccination of teachers as part of perhaps a phase 2 or another program which is not too far in the future?
Yes, there are such discussions. In fact, the President himself has mentioned this, and the Minister of Health has also spoken about it. So teachers are up there with those that should be vaccinated as soon as there's readiness in that regard to vaccinate those frontline workers as the teachers. And the other thing that's also important to mention is that we have not said when this should happen. So that's very important. We are not saying next week. We are not saying by the next term. What we are saying now is that let's have a discussion on the possible return of all learners. The modalities in terms of when and how and what needs to be in place will be discussed even at consultation time, but it will also be there in the proposal, which will end on the technicalities. And it must also be noted that once the proposal has been completed, it will be taken through the different platforms. There's a social cluster for government where relevant departments are involved. From there, we go to NetJoy. From NetJoy, you go to the Ministerial Advisory Committee. From there, you go to the NCCC. So it's a long way. From there, then go to Cabinet. So there's a long way to go still. So all the inputs that we are getting now from the colleagues that are on the line are assisting in giving the department a sense of the different focus areas that we need to pay attention to as we begin the process of introducing this matter formally through the relevant platforms.
Now, Ms. Barnes, Dr. Sarah Schoeman highlighted some of the challenges that are being experienced by learners who have had to learn remotely and who are on a rotational scheduling. But from the teachers' union perspective, what is it going to take in order to make sure that students are indeed brought up to speed as far as maintaining the curriculum and are adequately prepared for whatever grade it is that they may be entering or that they may have entered this year?
Actually, the National Teachers Union is not against the learners going back to school, but the problem lies with the department, whereby we are finding that there are schools that are being neglected out there, especially in the deep rural areas, where you find that there are no classes at all. Learners are about 60 to 70 learners in each class. If the Department of Education can provide these mobile classes where the children can be actually separated into 20, and then also employ teachers. There are no teachers out there to go and teach. Most of the teachers have their own comorbidities and they are sick. Most of them have passed on, and there's nothing that the department has given to us to say this is the plan of how are we going to employ teachers. For example, if I may say, if I might put this, in KZN we've got an app which doesn't work at all. So therefore the teachers are not being employed. Learners go to school just to play and don't learn. So that on its own, it also contributes to the learner not being able to be taught in a proper way. So I do understand what Anthony is saying. That is quite correct. But we want teachers to be safe, as well as we want learners to go back to school, but in a very safe environment where they are going to be seated accordingly, where the social distancing is adhered to. But if the department is not going to do that, is not going to take into consideration that the deep rural areas, they don't have classes at all, then they are going to make those schools to be the ones that are having the most teachers that are going to die.
Ms. Barnes, you've highlighted quite a number of issues that are directed at the Department of Basic Education. Mr. Mhlanga, I'll give you an opportunity to respond when we return from our break. Thank you to all of you for staying with us. We continue now with our conversation on the proposal which is going to be put forward by the Department of Basic Education on the complete reopening of primary schools, allowing the learners to go back to school on a full-time basis. And for this conversation, we are joined by Mr. Elijah Mhlanga. He is the Basic Education spokesperson, Ms. Cynthia Barnes, the General Secretary for the National Teachers Union, as well as Dr. Anthea Ceresetto, the CEO of the governing body Foundation. Let's pick up now where we left off just before the break, Mr. Mhlanga, to a question I think that you are best suited to answer here. It is an allegation made by Ms. Barnes that the Department of Basic Education is really not paying attention to rural schools, that infrastructure still continues to be a problem, that mobile classrooms should be made more available in those type of settings. Just your response to that, as well as the efforts that you are putting in.
Well, it becomes a problem when the colleagues speak as though they're an outsider in the sector, when in fact they're part and parcel of the system. It is better when the approach is one that seeks to empower the department to focus on certain things rather than to accuse. Because as I'm speaking to you right now, I'm in Limpopo with the Director General, who has been crisscrossing the country, monitoring for himself the delivery and acceleration of school infrastructure in our schools, to make sure that implementing agents, provinces, all officials are monitoring, because we are concerned about the state of school infrastructure right across the country. It's a matter that is actually being given so much attention that the minister convened a meeting literally every Friday morning for 2 hours, focusing on the delivery of school infrastructure, to get daily reports of how many schools, status and progress of different infrastructure projects across the country, whether sanitation to the building of schools. So it cannot be said that the department is not paying attention to rural schools, because we are doing exactly that. It might not seem like it, but if you are in the sector and you are a social partner of the department, request information and we'll make that available to you.
Mr. Mhlanga, what are the challenges that you've experienced? You talk about update meetings, you talk about oversight visits, but the issue really is one of delivery. What are the fruits of those meetings, the fruits of those oversight visits? If you could highlight some of the successes that you have achieved in that regard, as you say that they are there.
No, there's lots. In fact, we just need to follow up on our social media platforms, including now, today. We are showing the progress of every project that is visited. If you look at what Eastern Cape has done, they handed over a school yesterday, they handed over another one a day before yesterday, and 2 last week, and it happens every week. Brand new schools that have state-of-the-art facilities, replacing mud schools, replacing schools built with inappropriate infrastructure, some of the older schools that were built by communities themselves. So delivery is there. It's just that when we invite media, when we post these things, it doesn't make news because it's boring. We are told that we want to be praised for swimming because we are fish. It doesn't work like that. We also need to acknowledge these things. Let's not just point out when things go wrong. When work is being done, we also need to acknowledge. We will be going out to profile in pictures all the work that has been done in the past year, of course, noting the delays that were caused, of course, by the COVID-19 lockdown, which prevented movement, which halted work across the country. But we are accelerating all of that right now. Mobile classrooms are extremely expensive and not sustainable. It is better to build a properly constructed structure which will last very long.
Ms. Barnes, let me bring that back to you. Are you satisfied with the response that you're getting from Mr. Mhlanga?
Actually, I'm not satisfied because he is saying we should be part and parcel of, we do understand that. But if I am saying some of the schools don't have the mobile classes, that is true. Some of the schools don't even have water and ablution toilets. That's true. For example, it was last month where there was a video that went viral of a school that the toilets were full of maggots and nothing was done. Only afterwards, I was the one who actually phoned the district director to say they must go and check to the school. So if he is saying they are working, okay, it's fine, they might be working in some areas, but where I stand and where I am, those schools, I can give you a list of number of schools that are really a disaster, where when you go into those schools, you can think only the pigs goes to those schools. For example, I've got that Sokulu school, that is one, it's just an example. I've got school like in Uchini primary school right in Gwelezane, where if you go there, even the windows, they're broken. So if you are saying the learners are in a very conducive environment, that is, I don't want to say that's a lie, but that is not true. I also wish that the department could go to all those schools and check those schools whether the education system is doing the right thing to the learners. The learners out there in the deep rural area, they are really suffering. And we are promoting what is called the inequality as it has happened during the apartheid era. So if we are going to look after the schools that are in urban as well as the township schools, then that is a problem on its own. We need to go down to the deep rural schools and look at the children that are going there. Most of the children that are there are the children with no parents. They're only staying with their grannies and grandpas. And if they go to school, you'll find that they've got nothing. They don't even have the toilets, they don't even have water. Those are the basics.
Ms. Barnes, we'll have to leave it at that for this afternoon, but clearly a lot of issues to continue unpacking here. I thank you all for your time today. That's Mr. Elijah Mklanga from the Department of Basic Education, Ms. Cynthia Barnes from the National Teachers Union, as well as Dr. Sarah Seto, who is the CEO of the governing body foundation. And that's where we leave that particular conversation. But certainly we'll continue keeping up with the developments of the proposition as well as the research that is going to go into the feasibility of opening primary schools on a full-time basis.